Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Good to see everyone here. Good to hear from everyone that is joining online. And Debbie, you are listening, or to anyone else that is tuning in from anywhere all over the world. A big shalom to you. Thank you for tuning in. We would love to hear you, whether in the chat box, give your questions, give your name. We'd like to know that people are listening all over the world. Today's class will be on page 130, this week's Torah portion. By way of introduction, we often speak about generosity, giving. How often do we make a real sacrifice when we give? Right? Think back in our life. What are those times that we've given? And it need not be money. The answer is not necessarily, it doesn't have to be money. But what are those times that we have given that really hurt and we still did it? We're used to the notion of giving when something is extra. But when you give and it hurts you, that's real giving, all right? When I was younger, I remember hearing a story, and it's mythical. At the time, I thought it was true, of a doctor who was getting their last tests before getting their MD. And the way the story went is that there was a written test and there was an oral test, okay? And they were being quizzed on a bunch of things. They did fantastic on their written test. Oral test, acing everything as well. And then they get this question, what happens if you're walking down the street and you notice someone with a huge wound and they're bleeding profusely? How do you stop the bleeding? So they mention, I would use this equipment and that equipment. And the person asking the question says, no, you don't have any equipment with you. Well, then I would run to the nearest store and no, there are no stores near you. And they were thinking, and he said, all right, you fail. You take the shirt off your back. That's what you do. You take the shirt off your back and you stop. Like, all right, so I got one question wrong. No, you didn't just get one question wrong. If you got this question wrong, you're not ready to be a doctor yet. You're missing a fundamental idea that is at the core of what you have to do. All right. I don't believe the story ever happened, but it makes a powerful point. How often are we willing to literally or figuratively take the shirt off of our back to really help someone? What are examples in real life? So before we dive into the Parsha.
Children.
Children. Right. So that's good for, right. A parent's sacrifice so much of their physical, emotional well-being. I mean, time, energy, assets for
Sometimes it's even more than put all that plus the fact that sometimes you have to feel pain because your child is doing something wrong.
Right.
But you're trying to, and you can't.
All right. So children would be a good example, and I like that metaphor a lot because, of course, what Torah asks us to try to do is to look at everyone like God's children. There is still a hierarchy. Children come before other people. But, all right, what else?
Aren't you doing children out of love? And therefore, to say it's a sacrifice to love. I mean, a lot of us had children.
Someone at the door that wants to come in? I just want to make sure no one's... I keep on seeing shadows, so I want to make sure. No. My imagination. Okay. What were you saying, Hal? So it's out of love.
And so, well, it might seem like a sacrifice at the moment. You're going to do it.
Okay.
Your neighbor's going to do it. Your mother did it.
So it's a bigger deal when it is to someone else. But I think the children metaphor is good because we can relate to doing it for children. Like I have a friend of mine that recently donated a kidney. It's a big deal.
That's what I was thinking.
That's what you were thinking.
I was thinking when people,
And I think about it often because it's the gift of life, at the same time, and we've had discussions about
to
this
their husband.
before at different places in your life, it's the decision that involves your wife and your children as well to do that. And I ask myself, would I be willing to do that? That's a hard one. I think I've told you before, Torah-wise, it's very much encouraged, but at the same time, it cannot be mandated because it is jeopardizing your life in some manner. So that's why Torah-wise, it's considered the ultimate gift, but not something that they can say you have to do. It's a personal decision that everyone does. What other examples? Yeah.
The Secret Service, that they're willing to step in
Mm.
front of the president
Mm.
to take a bullet.
And I like these metaphors because we live in a world today where a lot of it's hard to relate to this idea as much. It used to be where this was life. It used to be, because everyone served in the military or because everyone lived in these small communities, they were used to making real sacrifices. You read Jewish stories and they would just, old stories, they would give everything away for someone. It's incredible. And I just try to relate it to contemporary life where we live, thank God, in a better place physically, but the art of that I think is somewhat lost. Any other examples, Brian, of
Nope.
Tale of Two Cities.
Right. But so we'll see one in the Torah that's often not realized, and it's in this week's Torah portion. So the Torah portion this week is part 2 of the construction of that portable sanctuary the Jews had in the wilderness. Last week it discussed the building of the items. This week it's the building of the garments, or the construction of the garments that all the priests would wear. However, it begins with the instruction to light the menorah. There was a menorah in the temple that was lit every single day with olive oil. And the parsha begins that God tells Moshe, you should command Aaron that he should light the menorah every single day. Okay? That is how the parsha begins. One of the earliest commentators realizes something very unique about this parsha. Why don't you begin? Barbara, text 1a. And you should command.
And you shall command. Moses' name is not mentioned in this entire portion, in contrast to the entire rest of the Torah, which from the moment Moses is born, every portion mentions his name. Why is this so?
Let's understand the question before we understand the answer. This is the only portion in the Torah from the moment Moses is born until the end that his name is not mentioned. It's interesting. Moshe is mentioned 770 times in the Torah. That's how many times his name is mentioned. But 0 in this week's portion. One little clause. It says from the moment, the beginning, it says that there's no other parsha where Moshe's name is not mentioned. That's not literally true because the last book of the Bible, okay, the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, who is talking? Whose mouthpieces? It's Moses's, and his name is not mentioned in 1 or 2 of those portions. Because the name I is mentioned. But there it is more understood because he's doing the speaking, so his name is not mentioned. I find it interesting, though, that he doesn't mention that here, but putting aside the time that he's doing the speaking, any other portion mentions his name numerous times. In fact, there's no other parsha that only mentions his name 1 time. So it seems to almost be on purpose that this portion mentions his name 0 times. Why is that? So this commentator, the Tur, answers.
The reason for this is because when Moses was pleading with God to forgive the Jews for the sin of the golden calf, he said, and if you do not grant them forgiveness, erase me from the book that you have written. A Sadduc's curse, even conditional, is always fulfilled in some way.
It sounds like the Twilight Zone. Whatever comes out of a tzaddik, a righteous person's mouth, is fulfilled in some manner. So Moshe tells God, coming up soon, in 2 weeks actually, text 1b, let's do this just to get the context, and then we can discuss it more. How? Do 1b. In 1b,
And Moses returned to God and said, please, this people has committed a grave sin. they have made themselves a god of gold. And now, if you forgive their sin, but if not, erase me now from your book, which you have written.
So Moshe says, if you forgive the Jews from the golden calf, which we'll read about in a few weeks, then good. If not, cross out my name from the entire Torah. That's chutzpah, by the way. If you want to know what the greatest line of chutzpah in the Torah might just be this. I want no part of your book if you're unable to forgive the Jewish people.
It's almost like he's threatening.
Yeah, he's threatening God. We speak often about Jews arguing with God. Here he is threatening, in a sense. And now, in the end, did God forgive the Jews? Yes, he did. That being so, Moshe said those words. And when a tzaddik utters words, they have a force and a power. So the Baal HaTurim, this commentator writes, his name was blotted out of one Torah portion this week. Yeah.
So, who established that Moses is a tzaddik? Because in the books of Moses, only Noah has that distinction.
Noach is the only one that is mentioned by name as being a tzaddik. That is true.
Right.
That is true. It's more of the Torah normally doesn't grade people's performance, But if there are tzaddikim to choose from, Moshe seems to be at the top of the list. So it's not like anywhere it says Moshe equals tzaddik,
Right.
but as far as we go, he ranks pretty high. So Moshe says these words, and the way I look at it is, a regular person like me, I talk all day long. Words don't mean that much. A tzaddik or a tzaddikis in the female, every single word is calculated. They put so much energy in every word, and it's holy energy. And the words that leave their mouth have some power. We know this. We know that God creates worlds when he speaks. And we also create a reality when we speak. That's why gossip, for instance, is so negative. But for most of us, it may not trickle down into this physical world. A tzaddik does. So whenever a tzaddik has anything that leaves their mouth, watch out. Where else in Torah? Trivia question. Do we see someone saying something and it having a negative effect that they didn't want to happen?
What about you telling Adam, take a bite?
No, but she knew that was not allowed. It did have a negative effect, but God had warned them in that case. All right. Where else did someone make a threat that if da 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 da, then this should happen, and that curse ended up being fulfilled?
Lot's wife?
So, all right. She was told not to look back, and she did, but that was an instruction she was told from above. When did a human say something, and it came back to haunt them? So the Zohar writes in text 2, there are 3 people who cause harm to themselves, and one of the examples is Moshe, and his name is not mentioned in Tetzaveh. So the Zohar writes this in text 2. I don't know the other 3. I only know one other example. I wonder what the Zohar means when there's 3. I don't know the answer. But the other example would be text 3a. Hal, do you read the last text? Janice, read 3a. This is when Jacob is fleeing from his father-in-law's house.
Okay. And Jacob replied, and he said to Laban, because I was afraid, because I said, lest you steal your daughters from me. The one with whom you find your God shall not live. In the presence of our brothers, recognize for yourself what is with me, and take it for yourself. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen.
Remember that one? So before Jacob fled his father-in-law's house, his father-in-law was abusing him, he was stealing from him, and Jacob knew it was time. After living in that area for how long? 20 years, 21 years, it was time to pick up with his family. He picked up and fled. His daughter, Jacob's wife, Rachel, decided not just to leave, but to leave with something. What did she steal?
An idol from her
She
dad.
stole her father's idols. Okay, not a story that's often discussed in the Torah. Commentators say she was hoping to wean her father off of idolatry. In general, that's not the best thing to do. If you're trying to get rid of, don't steal someone's idols. I don't think that's going to be the most effective way. In any event, she steals the idols. Laban comes chasing after Jacob and says, "What did you do? You just ran away like a thief." Jacob replies, "I was afraid. I thought maybe you wouldn't let me go." Then Laban says even worse than that. Not only did you steal my family, but you stole my idols. Jacob says, I did not. For sure no one stole your idols here. If anyone stole your idols, they should not live. He said those words, having no idea that his wife took the idols. Now the truth is this is a little bit different than in Moshe's case, because here the condition was actually true. She had taken the idols. In Moshe's case, he said, if you don't forgive the Jews, my name will be blotted out.
Yeah.
And God did forgive the Jews. But nonetheless, in some way, Jacob was responsible for Rachel passing away shortly after this story. Okay. I mean, this gets into the whole discussion of evil eye and saying words and the power of words. We're not going to go there today. But what is important to this story is that this is the only parsha where Moshe's name is not mentioned, and it has something to do with the sin of the golden calf. Okay? Moshe saying something. Now here's the question. Okay. So Moshe said it. Sin of the golden calf. His name is supposed to be taken out of one portion. Why this portion? Any questions or comments so far, Debbie?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
More than okay.
Okay. Well, you were asked about an incident that may have happened, and I was thinking of, was it Balaam, the non-Jewish prophet, who was comparable in power to
Moses?
The Jewish prophet? And so he tried to curse the Jewish people, and in response, the opposite, he had to bless the people.
Right, so the words bounced back in a different direction. There it was to the positive. That is true. That is true. There it was to the positive, but here are times where it was to the negative. But here's the question. Why this portion? If Moshe's name is going to be taken out of Parsha, this seems like a pretty odd choice. And that is the question that the Zohar asks. The Zohar asks, text 4, Pam.
Let me ask, the Parsha of Tetzaveh appears after Moses' request. Is documented.
So he asks the Parsha of Tetzaveh, and it's a mistranslation. The Parsha of Tetzaveh is before Moshe tells God. Mistranslation there. This Parsha is before Moshe asks God to erase me from your book. So if there was any Parsha in which Moshe's name should not be, it should be from that point in the story and onwards. You understand the question or not? Yeah.
After is highlighted.
Yeah.
So I think they meant after, really, because then it says he answered. There is no chronological order to the Torah.
After is, but the way the Hebrew reads is, it's after Tetzaveh that Moshe said this statement.
Oh, so what does that mean?
Oh, right.
I'm reading the Hebrew. The actual Zohar says, it's after this Parsha where Moshe says, God, you better forgive the Jews or else my name should be erased. We didn't get to that point in the story yet. That's still coming up.
Oh.
That happens afterwards. So why would it be that in this week's Parsha, Moshe's name is not mentioned?
Before.
Okay? So this was a pretty bad mistranslation. Thankfully, the Hebrew. I always wonder why they put the Hebrew here, so that's what I do.
So are you saying it wasn't in response to the fact that he said those words?
No, it was in response, but the Zohar is asking, it's an odd choice. If his name is supposed to be blotted out of one portion, would it not make more sense to have a portion that follows that curse of Moshe, not one that comes prior to it? It's obvious. In 2 weeks, no, next week Moshe tells God, God, you better forgive the Jews or else my name will be erased. The Zohar writes, it's because he said that his name was blocked out of one Parsha. Which Parsha? This week's. Should be next week's or some other one after that. So the Zohar answers there's no chronological order in the Torah. So don't get caught up in the storyline. That's not important. But that still doesn't answer the question. Why was Tetzaveh chosen? So we don't have an answer from the Zohar here. But does anyone know what today is on the calendar? That's why I wanted to do this class. What is today? The seventh day of Adar.
Oh.
It's the yahrzeit of Moses. Today's Moshe's yahrzeit. Seventh day of Adar is Moshe's. And on most years, whether it's the first Adar or the second Adar, we read this Parsha the week Moshe ends up passing away. So this is a more contemporary, this is not the Zohar, this is more contemporary, text 5. Brian, yeah?
We will now explain why Moses' name is not mentioned in the portion. This portion usually falls out in the week of 7 Adar, which is the day Moses passed. For this reason, his name is not mentioned in this portion, for Moses passed.
Okay, so if we were looking for a Parsha to not have his name, this is a good week, because this is the week that Moshe's physical existence departed. So his name is not mentioned in this week's Parsha. Very interesting. And today is his yahrzeit. Yeah, it's good. People, what were you going to say, Hal?
What is the translation of Titzavah?
Titzaveh means to command. The Parsha begins,
Doesn't it have another meaning?
yes, connect. You're probably thinking of a discourse we learned a while ago on this very same verse about Moshe connecting the Jews to God. But that's not the literal meaning. It means you should command, like a mitzvah. Titzaveh is the same as mitzvah. Okay. So that's end of part 1. Part 1 concludes now. What do we know so far? Moshe's name is not mentioned. Why? At least because of the Zohar says is because he told God, erase me from your book. And we have the Chernobyl Rebbe. Yes, he's from the town of Chernobyl. Before Chernobyl was known for a nuclear disaster, it was a famous Hasidic town. It was. And there was a dynasty called the Chernobyler Hasidim. Yeah.
I wonder if there's any connection though.
No, that happened to be the place where there was a disaster that happened later in history. That disaster happened after the, when was that?
Oh, it's been 20 years now.
I'm saying, but that was
Yeah.
well after the Holocaust when
Right.
all those communities were decimated.
But that's-
I'm saying that the Chernobyler Hasidim were not living in Chernobyl when the story happened, but his name was Rabbi Tursky from Chernobyl, and the whole Tursky family today comes from there. If you ever heard of a Tursky, they deal with addiction. They're very well known, the Tursky family. In any event, let's go forward. I'm going to skip a few texts now because of time. Here's the question. So far, we have a nice little idea. Moshe's name is not mentioned because he asked God to take him out of the book. How does the Parsha begin again? You should command.
Yeah.
Who is the you?
Moshe.
Okay. So it's not that Moshe is not mentioned. It's that Moshe's
Not me.
name is not mentioned. There's a difference. Moshe is very prominently mentioned. The Parsha actually begins, you should command. And I might argue, what is more powerful, you or someone's name? You is is like a face to face. You is someone's, I'm talking to them. As much as we talk about a name being important to a person, which it is, at the end of the day, a name is a handle on a person. Okay? What do I mean by that? If you were to live on an island and there was no one else around, Janice, would you need a name?
No.
So a name is a handle that other people can grab you on. It's not your essence. You, on the other hand, is. So on one, what?
It's like every man.
Correct.
But it's also insulting.
So don't get me wrong. The name has a connection to the soul, and that is why when someone is sick, there is an idea in Jewish tradition of adding a name or changing a name because the name is where blessings come through. So I'm not saying a name is insignificant. That being so, it's not the essence of a person. It's not the essence of a person. The very fact that you can change a name proves that it's not the essence of a person, because if it was the essence of a person, how can you change that? That's who you are. So Moshe's name is not mentioned, but he most certainly is. Okay. Let us now do text 8. The Medrash writes as follows. You're reading now, Barbara.
Moses gave up his life for them, and so they are named after him. The Torah is called Moses' Torah, as it is stated, remember the Torah of Moses, my servant.
Let me explain this idea. Moshe gave up his life for them. So Moshe puts a lot on the line for the Jewish people. He tells God, if you don't forgive the Jewish people, erase me from your book. He does more than that. What happens after the golden calf story? Jews commit a golden calf, build a golden calf, 40 days and nights pass. Moshe comes down, and what does he do?
Break the tablets.
Right. And contrary to what people think, that Moshe was just so upset and he lost it and just in a rage threw down the tablets, which is the way many people look at it, there's another meaning in it as well. When the Jews got the Torah, it was sort of like a marriage, all right? We entered into a covenant with God. When people get married, there's a marriage document. What's that called? The ketubah, right? What was our ketubah? It was the tablets. Okay, it was the tablets. What does it say on the tablets? Thou shalt not have any other gods other than one. Here Moshe is coming down with the ketubah, so to speak, and lo and behold, the Jews have violated one of them. So what does he do? I'm ripping up the ketubah.
It's like he's divorcing them.
Or better yet, I want to
Pre-marriage.
pre-marriage. You know what? Let's pretend the Jews were single when the mistake happened. It still wouldn't be good, but it would not be the same as if they were married. The Jews had an affair. That's what they did. They committed. So the Midrash writes that in Moshe breaking the tablets, he was actually trying to defend the Jewish people. And the same thing is true when Moshe tells God, if you can't forgive the Jews, then erase me from your book. What I'm getting at is as follows. If you said, what is Moshe best known for? Most people would say Moshe is the communicator of Torah. Moshe equals Torah. That is who he is. The Torah that we have written by Moshe, it was taught by Moshe, the oral tradition came through Moshe. Moshe is Torah. But if I asked you, what was the most important thing to Moshe? The answer may actually not be Torah. It would be his people. Okay? Because when it came time to make a choice between two things that were especially dear to him, the Jewish people and Torah, what did he say? God, if you can't find a way to forgive my people, erase me from the book that you had written. You think
my
about
people or your people?
with
Because he's really saving.
you know what he says? If not, erase. He doesn't say. He just says, if you cannot forgive them, then erase me from your book. That's what he writes.
Because I think it's much more he's saving God's choice of people. He never takes it as his ownership.
Okay. But his relationship is strong enough with the Jews that if they cannot be forgiven, he wants out of it. And you think about that. That is tremendous over here. We don't think, when we think about Moshe, we think about the communicator of Torah. No, when we think about Moshe, we should think of the ultimate lover of his people. Someone that would put everything on the line. And believe me, there's no one in the world that appreciated Torah more than Moshe. There's no one in the world who appreciated the tablets. Here he was, spending 40 days with God, face to face, and then he came with a decision and he said, if you can't forgive the Jews, I don't want it. That is the essence of Moshe. And really, that is the essence of what it means we should have for our fellow people. That we will put everything on the line. For Moshe, it meant Torah. Everything on the line in order to protect them. And this is why, actually, when the end of the Torah discusses the accolades, it discusses the praise of Moshe. The last verse of the Torah, I'm going to 11a for a moment. 11a, fast forwarding. Hal, why don't you read 11a?
There has never arisen another prophet in Israel like Moses, who communicated with God face to face.
We're not done.
Who executed all the signs and wonders that God sent him to perform in the land of Egypt upon Pharaoh and all his servants and to all his land. And for all the strong hand and great awesomeness performed by Moses before the eyes of all Israel.
That's the last verse in the entire Torah. Fast forwarding, 8 months when we finish the Torah, it says Moshe passed away. There was never another prophet who had the same connection with God face to face. And the same Moshe who did all the signs and all the wonders in the land of Israel, and the strong hand and the awesomeness done by Moshe before all the eyes of Israel. Now, what is the last sentence referring to? all the strong hand and the awesomeness performed by Moshe in the eyes of all of Israel?
And you're saying it's
Well, I would think it would be the 10, one of the plagues, or I mean, that's what, without this class, I would have thought when I read this line, it refers to splitting of the sea, taking the Jews out of Egypt, one of those biggies, right? And Nachmanides, who's one commentator, writes as follows. Where are we up to in the reading? Janice, text 11b.
And for all the strong hand. This is a reference to the splitting of the sea about which it is stated, and the Jews saw the strong hand. And great awesomeness. This is a reference to the events at Sinai about which it is stated, in order that his fear be upon you. Thus the Torah mentioned that these were performed before the eyes of all of Israel, for it already mentioned the events that happened in front of Pharaoh, the servants, and his land.
Okay, so the first verse refers to the 10 plagues in Egypt. The strong hand is the splitting of the sea, and the awesomeness is the giving of the Torah. The problem with that is Moshe didn't give the Torah. The awesomeness performed by Moshe, that doesn't really work. Right? You see the problem with that interpretation? So the most literal interpreter, Rashi, writes, what was the awesomeness performed by Moshe in front of all the eyes of Israel? Get ready for this, Pam. 11c.
Before the eyes of all of Israel, this expression alludes to the incident in which Moses was inspired to smash the tablets before Israel's eyes, as it stated, and I shattered them before your eyes.
Hold it there. You hear that? Moshe, you know what he did? He split the sea. He helped with, he didn't. He was the messenger to split the sea, bring about the 10 plagues, take the Jews out of Egypt, and he broke the tablets. And that's the end of the Torah. What? What? That would be the end? The last 3 words when we say it happened in front of all the Jewish people? Rashi says, yeah, that's what it's a reference to. That he broke the tablets. And you would say, how is that the greatness of Moshe? Well, based upon today's class, that in a sense was. The essence of Moshe was his ultimate love for his people, that even the most precious thing in the world to him, the Torah, came after his love to his people. And the Torah concludes when it wants to discuss the dedication of Moshe in this manner. And now perhaps we can go back and understand, on one hand, Moshe's name is absent from this parsha, okay? Well, text 12, let's do it inside. Brian, any questions before we go further or not?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why did he get angry or not? Because tzaddik is not supposed to be.
It wouldn't be rage, no. It was a calculated decision that the Jewish people were not worthy of, or more than this, it looks bad for the tablets to be there while they are doing the sin. Or like we said, yes?
I thought that the letters flew off of the tablets and then the stone became so heavy that he dropped them.
There is a medrash that writes that as well, that it was miraculous the entire period that he was able, I mean, those are pretty heavy kind of things. It's not one, it's 2 of them. And all of a sudden they assumed their natural weight when he saw this happening. All of these are important midrashim, and they all have their time. I'm expressing, Debbie, that's correct. I'm expressing one perspective, one interpretation on it as it pertains to Moshe choosing the Jewish people, in this case, over the Torah. And now we can understand text 12 now. And this is what the Rebbe writes, yeah.
The idea of a name is for other people to have a nomenclature. The true core of a person is far higher and deeper than the part which relates to other people, and consequently much higher than any name.
Okay. So there's the name of someone, and that's the part of you that we normally express. And then there's the essence of you. So what is happening over here? That in the one we started off saying today, oh, Moshe's name is not mentioned in the Parsha because it has to do with this golden calf incident, right? But then I asked, his name's not mentioned, but how does the Parsha begin? You. So you're right, his name's not there, but what is there? His essence. Because what was his essence? His dedication for his people. When did his dedication for the people come out? Specifically with the incident of the golden calf. This is not in the text, but I might even connect it one way further. It might even connect nicely with the fact that it's someone's yahrzeit. when someone passes away, we no longer see their physical existence. We no longer see their expression. We no longer have a handle on them in the world, but their influence and their soul lives on. Their essence lives on. So again, in the week of the year where Moshe passes away, his name is not mentioned in the Parsha, but the you of Moshe is mentioned
Does
in
it
the
always
Parsha.
occur on this week? This
Usually,
meeting?
almost always. Things can get thrown off one week. It's always this week or one off. It doesn't always work out that the class I teach this is actually the day of his yard site. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty neat. And the Rebbe finishes off with one numerical value for those that are into gematria, numerical value. We know that the soul has 5 names. Text 13, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Yechida, and Chaya. Briefly, one is the functional side of the soul. What is the emotional side of the soul? What is the intellectual side of the soul? One is the subconscious, and one is even higher than that. On a regular day, we only experience the bottom 3. Okay? Hal, I'll let you do this. This is a Hal. You'll like this gematria, yeah.
According to the popular idea that the complete expansion of any number is when it is multiplied 10 times 10, it turns out that the full realization of the 5 names of the soul amount to the number 500. Accordingly, the number 501, the numerical value of Titzavah, alludes to the true core of the soul, which transcends all the 5 names.
So the numerical value of this parsha is 501. What does the Rebbe say the significance of 501 is? That each name of the soul is one dimension of the soul. And when it's fully expressed, it's not just one, but 100, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And then there's the one on top of that. What is the one on top of that? The essence. Not a name of a soul, not a dimension of the soul, but the essence of a soul. And that is what comes out in this parsha. But let's just go from the spiritual to the practical. What is the take home from here? The ultimate praise of Moshe was not in his Torah scholarship, not in his prophecy. It was his love for one another. And his love for one another is seen best, not just when he argues with God, but when he actually says, I choose the Jewish people over that which is most precious to me, which is the Torah. And that's the take home today. What are those times in life that we truly, truly give up something that is incredibly important to us, the shirt off of our back, or in Moshe's case, the tablets he received, for the sake of another person? And those are the real sacrifices. And we don't have that many, I don't know how many opportunities we have of that today, but every now and then they come up. And we have to remember that's at the essence of our religion and our faith, to really, I don't know how else to say this, but we're so used to sharing a little bit and doing something when it doesn't hurt us so much. And there's a beautiful art to being able to make real sacrifices when, there's so many stories of that in Jewish history and tradition where people made real sacrifices, either for God or in this case, for somebody else. Any last thoughts? Yes.
Isn't Abraham considered the Hesed, the ultimate indication of love? And I look at it that it was his love for God was so strong that it superseded. Moses had a love for people and taught God. He was bringing God down wherever he was bringing
That is
people
true.
up. Yet I think Abraham was just within. He had nothing else but that love.
And Moshe appreciated Torah, appreciated this high level of prophecy, and despite that, you're saying, still chose his people. By the way, one last expression of Moshe's love for his people is seen in where Moshe is buried. Okay? Moshe wanted nothing else other than to enter the land of Israel. Nothing, in the Torah, when he was told he can't go, he asks God over and over and over again. And he wasn't allowed entry in the land of Israel. Okay? At the very least, couldn't have been buried. A lot of holy people today are buried in the land of Israel. They asked to be buried at least. To get to Jacob was brought over there. Joseph was brought over there. Why could Moshe not have at least got his final resting place? He wanted to be with his people. That whole nation, that people that he identified with so strongly for 40 years, he was staying with them on that side of the Jordan River.
not only that, but nobody knows where he's.
Okay, no one knows where he's buried, but it's not in the land of Israel. Oh, you're saying had it gone to the land of Israel, everyone would know where it is. So
Or
that would
even
okay.
anywhere, even not even having gone there. I see what you're saying, but it was done on purpose, from what I understand, from what I read,
Correct.
right?
Correct. The people should not
So-
know where he is buried. That is
Right.
true.
Right.
That is true.
So then, if he was to,
In Israel,
that's
people would
another
have known.
reason why.
Correct.
Since
Correct.
he wasn't supposed to go
Well, although presumably when God chose Moses' burying place, if he wanted him to be buried in another location in Israel, he could have done that pretty easily too.
there. That's
Yeah.
true.
So that's our take home. Next time we have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, and it's like, well, this is going to hurt. There's something very beautiful about a mitzvah that hurts in some capacity, obviously not too much, but that is truly when we have an opportunity to express our love for another, even when it comes at somewhat of a cost to us in some way. And we'll hold it over here.
Rabbi?
Yes.
A couple of things. One is we designate to call God the word Hashem, the name. So
Yes.
we're saying the name, we're not specifying to say what his name is.
Correct.
And so here, we're not specifying Moses' name, but we're indicating him by you. And it seems as if very similar to what we do during the Passover Seder, we ask the children to ask all the questions. And so with his name missing in this particular portion, it's asking the Jewish people to start questioning why is his name missing here?
Right. That is true. It's so interesting. One day someone must have realized, hey, wait a minute, Moses' name is not mentioned. How that came to be. It is very, very interesting. And was there something else Debbie wanted to share?
It probably is too lengthy. I was just thinking that his name not being mentioned specifically as kind of like any time that he may have been embarrassed
Right.
from.
The Rebbe typically did this where it starts off with a negative reason, like he's not named, his name's not there as a punishment, or he did something wrong. And so many talks to the Rebbe who would flip it over and say this is actually the most beautiful form of Moshe's name not being mentioned. It's not his name, but it's his essence. He gave up his essence, and you see that theme many, many times where the Rebbe does that. And the same thing is true with us. When we sacrifice for someone else, we lose our name, but our essence comes out.
Uh-huh.
All right. Yes,
Thank you.
Barbara.
On 13, I know Ruach is, I think, air. What are the other ones?
Okay,
Ruach
so
is breath, isn't it?
correct. Ruach literally means spirit or breath. The literal translation of all of these is nefesh is soul, and neshama is soul, and ruach is air, and chaya is life. So the literal translations don't mean much. Without like a spirit, in the Zohar and other places, it says that nefesh is that side of us that's functional. Why? Because an animal also has a nefesh. Okay? I'm not saying the animal's nefesh is the same as us, but it's, when we are acting emotionally, we have animals also through this have emotions, but ours is more sophisticated, especially when it's awe or deep love, that'll be ruach. And nishama is a special gift of intelligence that we have, especially as it relates to our ability to understand God. Look above us, realize that which is above us. On a regular day, we tap into those three. We deal with people emotionally, intellectually, and function. We talk, On special occasions, it says we get an extra dose of our chaya. And that is why it says in the holy books that on Shabbat, we get an extra soul. I don't know if you've heard that. And then when Shabbat is over, what do? We smell the spices to comfort ourselves for the soul leaving. It's not that we get an extra soul. We're in touch with the deeper part of us that we normally are not in touch with, and that is the chaya. Yeah, we'll hold it. Okay. All right. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.